Okay, today's lesson, or screencast number 2 of 6.5, is the general information about a neuron. A neuron is one of the last things that we are required to draw this year, so we will be drawing a neuron into our book. So first, before we go back and talk about each part of the neuron, let's take a look at the neuron itself. Okay, so this is the pre-drawn, drawn by myself, the neuron. All right, so let's take a look at it. We will label it first. All right, so the neuron, ladies and gentlemen, has a few parts that are different. All right, so remember, the nervous system converts sensory information into electrical impulses, which travel across these neurons. And while neurons may differ according to their role, sensory, relay, and motor, most share these basic components, including a cell body, okay, which I'll put the labeling in a couple of seconds, the thin branches, which are called dendrites. Actually, let me get that out. All right, so again, your cell body, your dendrite, your axon, which is the thicker black line here. All right, the myelin sheath I colored in blue, so your next line should be right onto that, right onto the blue there. Myelin sheath, we'll talk about all of what these things are. And then you'll notice in between, they kind of look like hot dogs or sausage strung together. Okay, that is your separate point there called the node of Ranvier. Let's go back one more time, do that again. Do that one more time in here. You can see I have the black line already kind of coming off of it. The node of Ranvier. All right, we'll get this up in a second here. So you go back and you put here the cell body. Okay, the cell body is also called a soma, S-O-M-A. That's the fancy schmancy word for it, but cell body is fine. The dendrite, thin branches, wiry, many dendrites to one cell body, but only one axon, and the axon is the black, the thick black right here. Okay, many of them, depending on the type of neuron you have, is covered by a myelin sheath, myelination. Okay, and there you have at the end, you have and we can put it anywhere. All right, because there's a node of Ranvier there, a node of Ranvier here, Ranvier there, and there. So you can put that wherever, and just keeping up with what I usually like to do. The node of Ranvier, isolated by the French histologist and pathologist Louis Antoine Ranvier, 1835 to 1922. Okay, so there you see, we'll talk about the function in a second. One other part that I forgot to label in the back here, which we're going to do, we'll take this down right here, and I'll type that in and make it smaller. At the end of an axon, we have what is called the terminal branch of the axon. Terminal branch of the axon, which I'll make smaller here, and then we'll put that in its place. The terminal branch of the axon. So there you see a pretty simple drawing of a neuron. Now this neuron is actually the typical neuron, but we are drawing, in fact, a motor neuron. So I want to make sure that you understand what we are drawing. All right, one last thing that's usually required by IB, that you want to add an arrow, because the direction of a nerve impulse is always, sorry, boys and girls, it's always from cell body, or I should say from dendrite to cell body to axon. So that is a required labeling with that, which we'll put below there. That size too again. So when you're talking about the movement of an impulse through a neuron, dendrite, soma, cell body, axon, dendrite, cell body, axon. And that there will save this up. That is the classic neuron. Now let's go back and discuss then the specific functions of these. All right, so we'll go back here. There you can see the production. Sorry, couldn't get the thing to go up. All right. All right, so there you can see it again, the cell body. And again, it has other parts. The circle inside is a nucleus. You don't have to label that. You're not going to lose if you do. All right, you can see everything there. The terminal branch, you can actually draw it like this at the end or one, how I did it, either way. All right, so let's go through these parts here. Oops, that's backwards. Number one is a cell body. Okay, so it's also called a soma. Soma is IBUs. Cyton is not, but it's another one you might see. All right, the soma, the cell body has all the cell parts. It has dendrites and an axon, one axon sticking off in all directions. So you can see by your drawing many dendrites, one axon cell body. Excuse me. A dendrite, as we can read, receives a stimulus. Okay, it's a receiver and it's going to conduct the stimulus toward the cell body. That's why we said dendrite to cell body. It's going to receive a stimulus. Let's move on because you can slow this down. All right, these are your thin branches. Thin versus thick, many versus one. I like to draw them like they're pitchforks. The axon extends away from the cell body, one axon, and it's going to be the transmitter to another neuron. All right, so we're going to go back to, all right, we're going to go back to the diagram to label a Schwann cell. My apologies to you. So this way you have the Schwann cell, the entire thing labeled. So they are surrounded, boys and girls, by Schwann cells. A Schwann cell is the axon covered in the myelin sheath. Okay, a Schwann cell. So when we're done, I'll go back and read and label that. We should know that. All right, a Schwann cell, named after Theodor Schwann of microscope fame, produces a fatty substance, and the fatty substance is called a myelin. And myelin is much like what surrounds a plug. So it improves the conduction and speed or conduction speed of an impulse along the axon. All right. So myelin is a type of fat, and it's an insulator, keeps the electrical impulse in, and in the end, it's going to improve the conduction speed of it. A node of Ranvier is actually a gap, a space that separates different Schwann cells. All right. And if you look at myelination, we'll come back to saltatory conduction all right. So the purpose then of a Schwann cell, of the myelin sheath, is to increase the speed of the transmission of the impulse, and that is via what is called saltatory conduction. And saltatory conduction, we'll come back and we'll talk about exactly what that means a little bit later on when we take a look at the movement of an impulse. All right. So faster transmission. That, though, there is kind of what is asked. All right, basically what you have there. All right, so there you can see the different kinds of neurons. The motor neuron is the neuron that is commonly asked by IB. You do not have to draw the sensory neuron or the relay neuron, which is the interneuron, only the motor neuron. You should be able to recognize the other two. Bipolar neuron, notice there are two ends, a bipolar one coming off from there. Bipolar neurons will come in a little bit later on when we take a look at neurobiology, and that's next after this. So you can see it again, myelin sheath. All right, so we're going to stop there, go back to this diagram. All right, and we're going to take one label up, one whole label. All right, let's see how we'll do this to make it better for us. Whole thing up. Right, and from there we'll call that the SCHWANNCELL. Like having me in class, I babble here just like I babble in there. Okay, so your Schwann cell is any one of the axons surrounded by. All right, they're named after Theodor Schwann. All right, so that's it for the overview of a neuron.